I can't.
No, we have to mute it, I think.
We can use them, but the problem is we wouldn't know if they wanted to be unmuted.
Can they hear you, Dan?
Not unless they're listening through the system.
Glennice, we cannot mute you because we could mute you, but then we would not know if you wanted to speak or not.
Okay. Can I individually mute mine?
You can individually mute yours, yes. We would not be able to hear you, but you would be able to hear us.
And what is that command?
It would be whatever is on your, are you calling from a landline?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. It would be whatever is available on your phone.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I turn on mine and off as I want to speak.
You're on the record.
Seeing at 6 p.m., I'd like to call the March 18, 2020 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. If you're able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Here.
Councilmember Petty,
Here.
Councilmember Navarre,
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Here.
Councilmember Nackstedt,
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And just for folks that might be watching online, we're practicing our social distancing here. We've got 3 council members that are calling in online, and our administration staff that normally sits up here, but they're not. They're in the throughout the chambers here. So it looks a little bit different this evening. So I wanted to explain that right off the bat. Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to draw your attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action, add item G10 to be taken up first after unscheduled public comment. The item is action approval, support the city manager's disaster declaration, an emergency declaration requested by the city manager. Add item D6 to be taken up second after unscheduled public comment. Resolution number 2020-15. Extending the disaster emergency declaration for the city of Kenai made on March 18, 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, requested by the city manager. Add item G11 to be taken up third after unscheduled public comment. Ordinance number 3114-2020, authorizing the suspension and modification of various sections of Kenai Municipal Code regarding council meetings and other public meetings and participation in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our city and declaring an emergency. And this is accompanied by ordinance number 3114-2020 and the supporting memo requested by legal. And add item D8 to be taken up in normal order of business. Resolution number 2020-16 supporting the appointment of Robert Ruffner to the Alaska Board of Fisheries, accompanied by resolution number 2020-16 and supporting memo. This is requested by Mayor Gabriel. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda and packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing and hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Nackstedt.
I move for approval of the consent agenda, request unanimous consent.
Second.
Are there any proposed amendments to the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll have the clerk read those into the record at this time.
Tonight we have the regular meeting minutes of March 4th, 2020. We have an action approval item for the approval of bills to be ratified brought forth by the administration. We have approval of purchase orders over $15,000 brought forth by the administration. We have approval of a non-objection to the renewal of the liquor license for American Legion Post Number 20, brought forth by the city clerk. And we have the introduction of ordinance number 3113-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Terminal Improvements Capital Fund and authorizing an increase to the design agreement with Wince Corthell Bryson, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on April 1st. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Councilmember Naxton.
No objection, but I do have a question of the city manager, if you don't mind. And one of the items had to do with the dock and the engineering that had been done because of the 2016 earthquake that we had. It went to bid, and there was one bidder, so forth. And the change order is almost the same amount as what the original proposal from the consultant was. And is the engineering 100% again what it was before? It kind of listed some of the things that they were doing, but I didn't know what the scope of the work was, perhaps.
Mr. Ostrander.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. So, as you said, it's a significant change order, and this is one that I scrutinized very closely because it was so significant. First step was determining that it didn't make sense to change in the middle of the project, because the original engineering that was done was for the first earthquake, and then we had the second earthquake to follow that up. So this one then provides the engineering necessary for any modifications that we need for the second earthquake. But the reason that the engineering amount is so high this time is because a significant portion of it is actually for CA services. So the first one was for engineering services only. This one includes both engineering services that will cover what is needed for the second earthquake, plus CA services during construction.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested for approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection? Seeing and hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Next up, under scheduled public comments, we have none. We're on item C, unscheduled public comments. And at this point, we'll take up item G10, action approval, support the city manager's emergency disaster declaration. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we could. Oh. Do we? Okay, do we need to move it before we?
In your unscheduled public comments, did you want to open it up to the public?
Oh, I'm sorry, because we're doing, no, gotcha. I got it. Under unscheduled, thank you, Madam Clerk. Under unscheduled public comments, is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to the council on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item G10, action approval, support the city manager's emergency disaster declaration, requested by city manager. Council, or Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to support the city manager's emergency disaster declaration.
Second.
Second, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the city manager does have the authority to declare a disaster emergency, and in that declaration, it's valid for 7 days unless then approved by council and extended for a certain period of time, which is actually the resolution that you'll be seeing next. This emergency declaration provides an opportunity for potential federal and state assistance. It also is the mechanism that kicks off our emergency operations plan, which as soon as this is signed, the EOP will become active.
Thank you. Discussion from the body. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, please just refresh my memory. We have an existing emergency plan, right? It's binders and documents, and that's what we'll be following with the bolt-on of the virus consideration.
Mr. Ostrander.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gable, Councilmember Glendenning. Yeah, we do have an existing emergency operations plan. The one that we have is actually dated 2007, so it likely, after this emergency, we'll likely want to update that. But yes, we will be following the existing plan during the disaster.
Thank you.
Any other discussions from the body? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, and I just want to thank the city manager for putting this in front of us and taking the action that he did, making the disaster declaration. It's my recollection of the 2007 plan that it makes the city manager the point person for managing the emergency, and so I appreciate you taking proactively action regarding that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any folks calling in like to speak? I guess
None at this time, thank you.
okay. So you said that under the plan we had, that the city manager had the ability to invoke a disaster declaration for 7 days, is that right? So just for the folks that are listening, how would this change in regard to council's actions and your authority?
So, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So I could have declared a disaster at any time during this COVID-19 pandemic. Because we had a council meeting that was scheduled coming up tonight, I thought it more appropriate to bring it in front of council before I made the declaration, just to see if there were concerns from council, which is why I chose to wait until tonight. I will actually be the one signing the declaration, but I thought it would be good to get council's comments and have them weigh in prior to doing that. The resolution that will follow this, again, will allow council to extend it beyond the 7 days of which I have the authority to declare.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, just to note up the back trail a little bit, you'd already taken some proactive measures regarding library and other public facilities, and I think that was very prudent and just allowed us to step into the situation rather than try and do everything all at once. It's more manageable the way you created it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now on item D1, under public hearings, resolution number 2020-15, extending the disaster emergency declaration for the city of Kenai made on March 18, 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, brought forth by the city manager. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to adopt resolution 2020-15.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-15? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Discussion, comments from council?
Mayor?
Go ahead,
This is Tim.
Councilmember Navar.
Sure. Has anybody looked at when the 90 days is up? And is it 90 days plus 7, or is it, I just want to get a clarification on, and how close is it another council meeting to that 90 or
Gabriel,
97 days?
If I may,
Yeah,
so
Mr. Bloom.
I believe that the borough did theirs for 90 days yesterday, so ours would just be, it would be effective as of today, the date of the resolution, so it'd be 90 days from today. It can always be extended or repealed at any time by council action.
Very good. Did that answer your question, Councilmember Navar?
Yes, thank you.
Any other discussion from council? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're on item D2, ordinance number 3114-2020, authorizing the suspension and modification of various sections of Kenai Municipal Code regarding council meetings and other public meetings and participation in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our city and declaring an emergency. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to introduce ordinance number 3114-2020.
Second?
This is Tim, I second it.
Very good. Any discussion on the motion to introduce? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy, if you,
Thank you. I'd move for a second reading of ordinance number 3114-2020 tonight because of the emergency nature of the ordinance and the facts.
Second?
it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion for a second reading? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we now have before us ordinance number 3114-2020, authorizing the suspension and modification of various sections of Kenai Municipal Code regarding council meetings and other public meetings and participation in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our city and declaring an emergency. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3114-2020.
Second?
Is there any discussion, is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak on ordinance number 3114-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I would, as a sponsor of this ordinance, I would like to speak to it, and then at the appropriate time, make a housekeeping amendment to the last whereas.
Yeah, Councilmember Glendenning. We're still on the ordinance number 3114-2020. Yep. So since this is an ordinance, we had to go through the steps to introduce it, approve that, and approve a second reading, and now we're to the point of enactment. Any discussion from Councilmember Naxton?
Perhaps a question of you, of just how the process would work. It's kind of my understanding, I think you make the decision, planning and zoning are gonna call in, who's gonna be here, and how might that meeting be held?
Well, part of this just allows us to do that, because we don't have provisions in code that allow us to, let's say, our next council meeting, to have everybody call in telephonically, because right now we can only have 3 call in. So at that point, I could come to preside over the meeting along with the city clerk and city manager, where we wouldn't have to have everybody here. Now, as far as other, which I think that's what it applies to as far as commissions go, I'd probably defer to the clerk on that.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, it does relax some regulations there too. The Planning and Zoning Commission is required to have a quorum present in the room before they can have, and only have 2 present on the phone. So this will relax that and let them also be able to meet if needed in a more relaxed, in a teleconference state rather than, that would still be available to the public. I mean, we're putting provisions in place to be able to have them meet telephonically or virtually and stuff.
So if I might, so we planning and zoning, for example, we could have the chair and one other person here and everybody else have a
That-
full quorum.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, and then there's also provisions for only being allowed to call in for so many meetings, which these wouldn't count against those times. So it relaxes the rules to allow us to conduct the business of the city while still observing some of the mitigation measures that are recommended for to slow the spread of COVID-19. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, first off, I appreciate legal putting this together for us and the clerk, help get this on the agenda for our meeting tonight. I look at it as being a very flexible ordinance. Nothing would have to come back on our agenda for the council as a whole to deal with. The council's delegating everything to the mayor. We're piling up on the mayor's workload again. So following up on Councilmember Nacksted's comments, it's the way I read it is the mayor would kind of make the calls about how to do those meetings and everything. And I thank you for again for the extra time that the emergency is going to impose on you too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we do, practice best management practices when dealing with this. So certainly we're doing that with separated seating out here in the out in the chamber, and some things we're doing to separate. So, Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I too think this is entirely appropriate, and I can just see by the demonstration tonight that the technology supports what we're trying to do. Everybody can be heard, everybody can have their say-so, and we have the protocols everyone's acknowledged. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. I'd also point out that there is.
Gabriel?
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Navarre.
Sorry, I never know if I'm cutting you off or not, but just a clarification with Councilman Nackstead. It's my understanding that everybody could participate, even the chair, by teleconference, if need be. Certainly, I'm sure it would help the clerk if one person was there, but at the same time, I believe everybody involved could be telephonic.
That's correct, Councilmember Navarre. I've been thinking about how the logistics of this might work moving forward, particularly, more than likely with at least our next meeting and maybe the second meeting in April. And I think more than likely I would probably come in to the chambers at least to preside. It might be a little less tangled up, and I would feel comfortable doing that. But you're right, it would allow for that. And just the point of note here is that we do have, there's a sunset on this, which essentially would terminate upon the termination of the City of Kenai's disaster emergency declaration. So this would not live on in perpetuity. It's a sort of a stopgap to deal with the situation, the immediate situation we're in right now. Is there any other comments? I see Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, just, you'll do what's appropriate, but, my strong recommendation would be that at least one person, whoever is presiding the meeting, would be here.
Oh.
Yeah, it's difficult enough, I don't know how it would work with everybody calling in if there wasn't somebody here kind of controlling that a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought of, is it would be, I think, I have, even calling in, I think I'm even hearing like an echo or delay right now, which might, for the folks online that, we might get into this, it would get awkward. So I agree, that was, my thought was is that I would still come in and preside here, and Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. Following up on Councilmember Nacksted's comment, another suggestion is that for our meetings like tonight, you could consider a rotation so that if
Yes.
if the people are here, to rotate who are here in person and who calls in. Just
Well,
some thought, and then that would be.
Well, that's a good point in the fact that we don't know what might be happening 2 weeks from now. There's a recommended 14-day quarantine on folks that had been exposed to it, and even when they're not displaying symptoms. So there could be the real possibility that, I may not be the one here presiding. So yeah, even on that case scenario, but certainly something to consider for sure. Is there any other comments from council? Anybody online? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're now on item D3. Councilmember, I'm just going to point out, I know this is your baby here, so get ready to speak to it. Councilmember Glendenning. Ordinance number 3106-2020, amending Title 11 Harbor and Harbor Facilities to remove provisions that are no longer historically relevant, recognize changes to other chapters of City Code that now provide for lease and sale of harbor lands, and provide the Harbor Commission a platform to move forward. This is brought forward by council members Peterkin and Glendenning. Councilmember Glendenning.
Well, thank you for the reading of the introduction. Some background on this. The Harbor Commission has recognized a need for clarification. I'm sorry. Move to enact ordinance number 3106-2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3106-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Okay.
All right. Ready now?
Yep.
Okay, the Harbor Commission has long recognized a need and focus in its duties and has undertaken several efforts to review and recommend revisions to Title 11. And the most recent review of Title 11 by the Harbor Commission and a subcommittee formed for purposes of review resulted in recommendations to Title 11, recognizing the expertise of other city bodies in land use and planning, and a desire of the Harbor Commission to focus on regulation of the harbor and its associated activities. The Harbor Commission also recommends removing provisions from Title 11 that are no longer necessary because of the temporal nature of the procedures addressed, which have long since expired. The Harbor Commission recognizes that the city recently upgraded Title 22 city-owned lands, which now encompass the sale, lease, and acquisition of harbor lands, negating the need for separate provisions for the same in Title 11. And elimination of many sections of Title 11 is intended to be the first step in allowing the Harbor Commission to focus on harbor-related projects and activities and move forward with future potential recommended code change relevant to such project and activity. This resolution was passed by the Harbor Commission on its March 9th meeting, and they recommended approval. And if now is the appropriate time for an amendment to the last whereas, I'll introduce that prior to any discussion.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Councilmember Glendenning.
Okay. I move to amend the last whereas in ordinance 3106-2020 to read, whereas the Harbor Commission at its meeting on 3/9/20 recommended passage of this ordinance.
Second, requesting unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the amendment is approved. So we now have before us ordinance number 3106-2020 as amended. Any further discussion?
Just to point out that this is a work in progress. What we started with approximately 60 pages of code and have resolved it down to 7. I worked out the logistics with our attorney, Scott, and he suggested we take this approach. There are things that by necessity will be added back as provided in the sectional analysis in our packet. But what this will do will allow harmonization of the Title 11 and the Title 22 regarding land management in our city. There's things that can be added, like providing a map of the Tideland Survey 272. It is a plat. There can be other embellishments or fleshing out of the Harbor Commission's duties and emphasis based on current and modern needs. And so if there's any more questions, I stand to answer them.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. No questions. Just wanted to, note that this, as Councilmember Glendening indicated, this has been a work in progress for a long time. Want to recognize the work of the subcommittee of the Harbor Commission that worked on this for a while, and then the commission itself, and thank Councilmembers Peterkin and Glendening for this ordinance, which is really well thought through and dovetails nicely with the changes that council made to, the land disposition ordinance in the city. So I do support it, and thank you for the work.
Councilmember Nackstead.
I support it too, and it's always good to get rid of a bunch of code that's not necessary, especially if it's somewhere else, causes conflict. And as Mr. Glendening pointed out, it's a work in progress. And one thing that I notice is some of the things I think ought to be added specifically is the definition of the harbor, and then it goes on to the lease of lands, which is under 1120.020. But if you look at the harbor under the definition, it really boils down to is submerged lands and all of that, and like you said, that whatever the state gave the city, but that's below mean high tide, so that's below like 19.2 foot level. So you walk down the ramp about a third of the way, and maybe you get your feet wet, maybe you don't, but at that point, that's where the harbor starts, as opposed to including the dock and the top of the ramp and maybe the parking area and so forth that I consider part of the harbor as well, and how that gets fleshed out. So long as that's going to happen later, I really don't have any comments, but that's something that I think needs to be.
Yeah, just in retrospect, this is bifurcated to the extent that the Tideland Survey 272 does describe the waters and mud that you just described. Elsewhere in Title 11, what remains is a description of the city facilities and the public access to them. And verbiage can be added to make this ordinance clear. But a careful reading of it will allow for your observations, but it can be made better. Thank you.
Any comments from the folks calling in?
Yeah, this Robert. I'd just like to thank Scott and Jim for working on this, and especially Jim for bringing me up to speed. It was kind of underway when I got on council, and he's done a great job of helping me understand what's going on. And after meeting with the Harbor Commission several times, it's something that they want. So just want to thank Jim and staff. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Any other comments from online? Yeah, I'd like to chime in here too, because this was actually this was brought forth as a concern when I was on. I was on the harbor. I was liaison. Yeah, and you were a member of the Harbor Commission, and there were things in code, just so people sort of understand. There was requirements code that were outdated and had been for a long time, but the Harbor Commission, they felt like there were some of those items required certain action from the Harbor Commission. They didn't feel like they were doing their job because they weren't acting on these things that weren't relevant anymore. And so I want to also thank Jim, the subcommittee, and the Harbor Commission. So you've been like a dog on a bone over this, and really to get it to this point is very good. As Vice Mayor Malloy pointed out, where it dovetails into the changes we made to our city land sales lease policy, I think was really good timing, because I saw throughout the amendments that were made in the description, which thanks, by the way, Scott, for your version of the ordinance that allows you to just, because I read it through and then went through again and went through Scott's version where it was given the, the reasons for the changes, and a lot of it were comments made to that it relates, it's already sort of taken care of in that other policy that the city did. So kudos to you guys for seeing that through. Appreciate it.
Just one final comment. What was unique about the original Title 11 is that it actually gave the Harbor Commission unique powers regarding planning and zoning. They determined what the activities or the zoning activities within the purview of Title 11 would be. They settled all disputes regarding claims from territorial days. They platted everything. And then the action went, after it was approved, went to the clerk who codified it and took it over and filed it with the state authorities. We had planning and zoning powers even back then in 1980 to take care of everything. I'm sure as a courtesy the borough was involved, but it was 95% ours. And so as a historical document, I think it's unique.
Yeah,
And as you can tell, I've been like a coiled little spring. This is all I've wanted to do for 2 years is read this thing, and finally I got to blurt it out. Thank you for your patience.
Well, I think it was kind of interesting because part of the original code called for the peaceable use of the leased property, except for capital projects done by the city. And I thought, this is what was written well before the DipNet fishery, clearly, because they're, So anyway, thank you for that. Any other discussion on ordinance number 3106-2020 as amended? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, council. We're now on ordinance number 3110-2020, amending Kenai Municipal Code, section 23.55.030, qualification pay to add additional qualification pay items to the list of those for which employees continue to receive while on annual leave or when receiving holiday pay. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxted.
I move to enact ordinance 3110-2020.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3110-2020? And before we bring it to council, if you want, Paul, did you want to comment on this? Just to sort of give just a brief overview of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor Grable, we're on 3110?
Yeah, 3110.
Yeah, thank you. So, ordinance 3110-2020 is really almost a housekeeping ordinance. When ordinance 3098-2019 was passed, that was the ordinance that modified police compensation in a multitude of ways. There's a couple things that we didn't foresee. Actually, one thing that we missed in the ordinance, and then after we realized we'd missed that, we recognized one more thing in code that should change, and that is when you calculate hourly rates for annual leave and holiday pay, the investigator pay, certification pay, was not included in ordinance 3098, and it should have been. Investigators, when they are getting paid as an investigator, should accrue leave and holiday pay at the same rate as what they're getting paid in their normal job. While we were looking into this and realizing that language should change, we also realized that the certified municipal clerk pay was the same way, that it was not accepted out and included in calculating hourly rates for annual leave and holiday pay. So both of those things are corrected in this ordinance so that going forward, both investigators and employees that are certified municipal clerk and are eligible for that certification pay will accrue annual leave and holiday pay at the same rate.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Just to say thank you for recognizing this. Anytime we have complex legislation with a lot of moving parts, sometimes things don't get recognized right away, and I'm glad this was, brought to our attention in a timely manner.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on item D5, ordinance number 3111, 2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Terminal Improvements Capital Fund and authorizing an increase to the construction purchase order to Blasey Construction Incorporated. This is brought forth by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
Move to enact ordinance 3111, 2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3111-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Councilmember Naxton.
Just, it indicates in the end of the memo what we have left for a contingency, but we're really close to the end of this project, so and I think the last meeting, we asked about the, I realize it's kind of getting beyond here, but monies for a new boiler, since the one that we had in there, perhaps when the design was done about a year ago, had about 5 years left on it. Do we think that we're going to be able to do that with the contingency money that we have left?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. We are certainly hopeful that we can. We just secured the services of Wince Corthell and MBA to prepare a design to replace the boilers for those. We're hopeful that we can cover that with the existing contingency. Now, there's a couple things beyond the boiler that are still happening as well. The biggest one is the purchase of the furniture for the terminal also. So that's going to be coming out of that remaining contingency as well. But I will clarify that in the memo, it says that $369,000 in contingency is left. That is $369,000 of contingency that's left of the original $500,000 that the council authorized. So, this ordinance, like the other ordinances that have come before you as this construction has proceeded, are appropriations of FAA grant funds. So, for example, this one is appropriating an additional $144,000 in grant funds, which is used to support these change orders. So, $369,000, and I don't have the exact number. $369,000 is not the amount of total project contingency left. It is only the amount of city contingency that's left in the project.
Any discussion, comments from council? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now on item D6, ordinance number 3112-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Improvements Capital Fund and authorizing an increase to the construction purchase order to Carrillo Fire Incorporated. This is brought forth by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to enact ordinance 3112, 2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3112-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I just note with interest that there was, in the how can we say, the management of this construction agreement, there was just a slight difference in the counting of devices needed, and it was recognized, and appropriate adjustments were made, and thanks to project management for working that through, and your attention to detail is noted. Thank you.
Any other discussions from council? I just have one. Mr. Ostrander, is this, when's the completion date of this schedule projected?
Mayor Gabriel, the completion date is April sometime, I'm not sure of the exact date in April, but it's supposed to be done in April, and it's on schedule for that.
Okay, very good. Because I do know of some folks that I work with through my other job, I know that are gonna be taking ARF training, and they had thrown out, I think theirs is close to the middle of April, so. But by all accounts, it sounds like, they're pretty excited to go over there and check out the new props, and they said, it's like hot, like it's gonna be hot, not like sexy hot, but hotter than something they would expect under real life fire conditions, so, yeah. He is, yeah, so, thank you very much. Any other discussion on ordinance number 3112-2020?
Just a
Councilmember Glendinning.
quick comment. It's good to see that this facility is being upgraded and made up to modern standards, and it'll be of a great economic influence in our town. Just as I walk around, other people have approached me about the proposition of how can we say, broader fire training. We have another facility that's kind of kitty corner from that started out as a fire training prop, and there's remnants of a building and stuff there, and perhaps at the appropriate time we could take a look at it and maybe exploit its presence and we could be a fire training center. Just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and, yeah, absolutely. Any other discussion on ordinance number 3112-2020? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin? Was that a yes, Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Councilmember Glendinning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Nextet?
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D7, resolution number 2020-14, approving the execution of a lease of airport reserve lands using the standard lease form between the City of Kenai and Schilling Rentals LLC for Lot 5A, Block 1, FBO subdivision, 2018 replat. This is brought forward by administration. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of resolution 2020-14.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general?
Second that.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-14? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I see Mr. Bannock is here, usually a representative of the Shillings, and I'd just like to pass on to the Shillings. I appreciate their developing another lot with a hangar and site work and all of that in our city. And also I look forward to the use that is expected to be there too. I think that'll be a great asset with a number of workers that presumably some of them may actually live here in town, assuming they're not here now. The mechanics, the pilots, and the crew. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gable. Agree with Councilmember Naxted. Want to thank Schilling Rentals for their another investment in the city of Kenai. I appreciate their investment in their city and the growth that they generate. Thank you.
Councilmember Glendinning.
Yeah, just for the folks in Radio Land, this is just an example of another aspect of the forward-leaning outlook from city management that we would perhaps have such a thing as an airport, light airport industrial area that would foster and facilitate such a project. And kudos to everyone. Thank you.
Yes. Any comments from the folks online? Hearing none, I'd also like to just echo the sentiments of my colleagues up here, and anytime we can see local investment on our airport, that's much appreciated, and wish them well in their endeavor for the development of this parcel. Seeing or hearing no other comments, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendinning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin? Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D8, resolution number 2020-16, supporting the appointment of Robert Ruffner to the Alaska Board of Fisheries. And this is brought forth by myself. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to adopt resolution number 2020-16.
Second.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-16? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the body, and I guess I would like to just say that I got a notice last week that shortly after the materials for the packet was due, I wouldn't normally have brought this forth as a laydown because I don't generally like to do that, but right now is when the legislature is, or the governor's considering his nominees to the legislature for confirmation, and I was informed that Mr. Ruffner was going to reapply to the Board of Fish. He served previously. He'd been past executive director of Kenai Watershed Forum. Did an excellent job as in his previous term on the board, and I always said that I wish the whole body, and believe I don't necessarily agree with every little thing or every decision that he makes, but I understand that I think he makes that for the right reasons. He thinks that if you, what I have said, if you put Robert in a group of any amount of people from diverse backgrounds and industries within the fishing industry, the one person that would represent the fish would be Robert Ruffner, and he's concerned about the resource, but also to not to the extent that, that it's an industry. It provides economy to the local area and to the state. And so he'll find that balance to how best, figure for maximum sustained yield and opportunity for all user groups. So I was glad to hear he put his name back in the hat, and I thought it was appropriate. We've supported him in the past, and again, apologize for the timing of this, but this is kind of the way we had to do it. Otherwise, it might have been too late to be considered by the governor. So with that, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I agree with you. As I recall, the council did a resolution that supported him when he was first a candidate for it. And I also don't really favor laydowns, but I agree with you on this one because the council had previously taken that action to support him, and as you said, I think our previous support was justified. He was a really good Board of Fisheries member, and there is nobody on the Board of Fish currently for Central Peninsula, whereas other areas have multiple representatives. So I think it's important for the reasons that you said regarding timing too, that this be done. So I thank you for bringing it forward and spending the time to do it, and I support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, I too will be supporting this resolution. I've served with Robert Ruffner on Borough Planning Commission and a couple borough committees that were assigned positions by borough mayor and such. And I'm thinking that looking back on my association with him, he truly tries to, in the case of the fish or how fishing is addressed, he leans on the science and expresses it well, and an administration of any public comment or how can we sentiment of the area that he represents. He is very thorough in his analysis and would well represent our area, which is sorely needed in this system. Thank you.
I'd say it's an understatement. Thank you. Councilmember Naxton.
I have to agree too, and I've known Robert since he was in graduate school, and sampling in the river, that was before the Watershed Forum existed. That's what he did. And then a little later, I saw him here, late 80s, early 90s perhaps, at a council meeting. presenting something. And I was, and I could tell that the council was very impressed with how well he presents himself. And I have been on boards and commissions and done permitting through the Watershed Forum, using them as a partner through the years and working with Robert. And he's got an engineering background and a biology background, and he cares, he knows how to communicate well to kind of both sides of that. It's not just a biologist point of view or an engineering point of view, and I appreciate that balance that I've always gotten from him, and I think he makes sense to both sides.
Yep, thank you. Any comments from online?
I'd like to just give my support to Robert. The Board of Fish needs science-based people right now. They're, in my opinion, not making science decisions. So I think he would be an awesome person to be on that board, and he's done a good job in the past, and I think he'll do a great job in the future.
Any other comments?
This is Tim.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Navarre.
Yes, thank you. I won't reiterate, but I too support all the comments that have been made and support the resolution of Robert Buckner.
Thank you. Mr. Ostrander, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The point that you brought up earlier about the fact that the Kenai Peninsula doesn't currently have a representative on the Board of Fish, I was curious if council might want to add that as a whereas to this resolution, something to the effect that the Board of Fish does not currently have a representative from the Kenai Peninsula, an area that has historically had a representative, something to that effect. It might take a while to work in the language, but if that's important to council to include, I wasn't aware of that, and I know Jamie, who worked on the resolution, wasn't aware of that either. So if it's important to council to include that, we could take a quick time out and make sure that it's included.
I support.
Yeah, I would support that.
Yeah, I support it too.
We'll take a 10-minute at ease. All right, thank you.
Good.
We'll call our meeting back to order.
Unmuted.
I got Councilmember Peter. Peter, can you there? Councilmember Navarro, are you there? Councilmember Petty, are you there? Councilmember Peterkin, Navarro, and Petty, are you there?
Yes.
Peterkin's here.
Yes.
Okay, sounds like we're all here. Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have a couple of amendments. I'd like to take them one at a time. I'd like to add a new fourth whereas, or add one. The whereas is, whereas the Kenai Peninsula, and particularly the Kenai River, receives the majority of fishing pressure in south central Alaska, comma, necessitating the need for a Board of Fish representative from that area, period.
Second?
Any discussion on the amendment?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Councilmember Naxton.
I like to add on the, it would be the fifth whereas, so it'd be right after that whereas. Whereas the Board of Fish does not currently have a member from the Kenai Peninsula.
Second?
Any discussion on the next amendment?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. We now have resolution number 2020-16 as amended before us. Any further comments from council?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-16 is adopted. Thank you, council, for your support. Next up, we have item G5, action approval, special use permit to the State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources, Forestry Division for aircraft loading and parking, brought forth by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of the special use permit for the State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the special use permit to State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources is approved. Next, we have action approval, adopt a new city logo brought forth by the city manager. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to adopt the new city logo.
Second?
Second. Is there anybody that would like to open discussion on the city logo?
I would like to ask, this is Glenise,
Yes.
if there were other options. I would like to ask City Manager if there were any other choices other than the one that we see here.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Petty, you know, this was the logo that the marketing firm Divining Point did come up with. There were several other logo options that they showed in their presentation that were considered earlier on. At least through the development process, they were considered. However, they determined, and administration agrees, that one of the logos that they showed was far too abstract, and then the other logo was not abstract enough. So as far as final deliverables, this was the only logo that they provided.
I have one further
I'm
question.
sorry.
Is this logo also supposed to be representative of the K?
I don't think, could you restate, Councilmember Petty?
Okay. I was just asking if this logo was supposed to also be a representation of the letter K.
I see Mr. Ostrander's nodding his head in the affirmative.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. This is just a question. If we adopt this as a new logo, is it a new logo? You know, in other words, is the one that's like on our letterhead, is that also a logo? So we would have two logos, which is fine with me, but, you know, I just don't know if the intent is to totally replace the current logo, or if this is to be in addition to the current logo, maybe at some different uses.
Miss, Councilmember Petty, could you mute your phone, please? Or someone has their phone.
I don't,
Oh, I think we got it resolved. Thank you. Councilmember, or,
okay, thank you.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Vice Mayor Malloy. So the intent of this action approval item is to, in fact, replace the old logo with the new logo. So if council were in agreement that this was the new logo of the city, we would begin to incorporate on stationery. Anywhere where you see the existing city logo would be replaced with this new logo. So that's really the question that this action approval is asking, is if the council would like to make that shift. You know, interestingly enough, when we tried to research how the existing logo became the logo of the city, it doesn't appear that there was any legislative action that was taken. It was just that at some point that became the logo of the city. And I'm not sure what process that went through, but we weren't able to identify specific legislation that dictated that it was the formal logo. But we thought that it was appropriate that if we were going to make the change, that council should be the one to make that decision.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, would this logo include public safety uniforms?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. So for fire, they have a specific logo for the fire department that this logo would not be utilized in that case.
And in the case of the police?
Same thing with the police.
Okay, because there's a similar, only the cross is deleted from the top of their badge. Last time I looked, it's been a while.
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning. Yeah, so there's a couple different logos that are out there right now that the intent would be that they would remain. This action approval would simply replace the logo that you see, that the yellow logo, where that's being utilized currently. This would be replaced. This would be put in its place. As far as other logos that are currently within the city, at fire, there's some others out there as well. Airport has a logo. Those would not be replaced with this at this time.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just to follow up, yeah, my thought would be is that we start out with a new logo on the promotional items, okay, and then blend it in. I kind of like the idea of the way I'm looking at a letterhead here, and it says the city of Kenai, Alaska, and then there's a slogan above it. Okay, if we just had this on our letterhead, it said Kenai, it wouldn't differentiate us from the borough or other communities. Just a process thing. I think it's elegant and most welcome on our promotional items, and I would like to maybe just step into this a little bit. My thoughts.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. So we have already mocked up what a letterhead would look like with this logo, and I'm not sure if Dan has those logos. I know he created 3 separate logos for letterhead, and on that, there's different combinations, but generally this logo would be on the left, and then on the right, it would say City of Kenai and the address and the contact information directly to that. So there, if we were to utilize this on as our new letterhead, there would be no confusion as to where it was coming from, because along with the logo would be a statement that it was the City of Kenai.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Just a follow-up question to that then, looking at the existing, letterhead that's, I'm sorry, my thing just disappeared. Like in the memorandum, it says village with a past, city with a future, kind of like a tagline, if you will. And And I know that the marketing program had another tagline that I really liked, you know, the best place to Alaska. And I know if we approve this new logo, we're not necessarily approving the new tagline too, because that's not part of this, but is that what you foresee, like, you know, changing the letterhead also in that respect? And then I guess pins and cups would be different pins. There'd be new pins with this as opposed to the existing ones? Thank you. Just some mechanics about what you see.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, through the mayor, Vice Mayor Malloy. Yeah, so right now, because we are still in the process of what they call validating the claim on the best place to Alaska, the logo and the letterhead would not include that tagline. You know, our current logo has the tagline, City with the Past, or Village with the Past, City with the Future. The new logo would eventually have that tagline associated with on the letterhead. And you're right, if we have promotional products of any kind, like mugs or anything else like that, it would have the new logo and eventually would have the tagline. But until we roll that tagline out officially, probably sometime in midsummer, the tagline wouldn't be there with the logo, but long term it would.
Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilmember Navarre.
yeah, I appreciate all the comments, but I guess I'm on a different level. I'm ready to move on a new logo. You know, the old ones are there. They're in the history. They'll be on documents. They're not like you're Xing them out of your history or your whatever. But, you know, when we make new signs up, like you've seen Soldotna do their entrance to their city and things like that, you know, and it's, you know, I'm appreciative of what the marketing company did. They included a lot of things into our logo that we can tell the history of. It's just a different way, and it's a new, fresh way of reintroducing going forward. And sort of like our one tagline, Village with the Past, the City with the Future. You know, you got to make changes at times, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I wholeheartedly support it. It doesn't mean that at some point, if you did some type of advertising and showed the first one, the second one, the third one, that you couldn't use them. It's not saying you can't ever put them on anything, but what you're going to start doing is taking this new logo and putting it out there. And over time, it will be more prevalent than it currently is. And I think it's time. I think it's time for new pins, new whatever, the whole works. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Naxton.
I agree with Mr. Navarre in that. Well, first off, I like the logo too, and I appreciated the presentation we had and its meaning. And the K is there. They said it was. I see it, and actually, it's kind of reminds me of the airport logo, which so they kind of complement each other, I suppose. They're different, but they have similarities. And when I was at the borough for my time there, we went from one logo to the next, and there was a little bit of a transition, and it caused nothing but confusion. Well, which one should I do? You know, I got to do this memo, and the mayor's going to see it. Well, am I going to have this logo, or should I have that one, or does it matter? And basically, it's just okay. Everybody use the new logo, so you kind of just have to jump in and just do it. You don't confuse the people that work here nor the public with the logo. I mean, it's just, you know, does one mean one thing and the other means something else? You know, for it's coming from a city, you know, office. So I think we just kind of need to jump right in and do it.
Councilmember Glendenny.
Yeah, my question is there still some delay on the verbiage? You know, the best place to Alaska, how we would fit that into promotional items, cups, pins, and things like that, and on our letterhead. I tend to agree that, maybe we're getting away from our historical past and do want to look into the future. But I would like to see, if there was suggested that maybe there's some different renditions of this, and I would like to see the verbiage, how it is applied to it. As an old retailer, I would buy from samples. I would want to see the sample, not what the salesman told me about it, but that's just me.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, I wish I would have brought those three with me that show how the letterhead would be represented with this. I don't think that I wouldn't describe it as confusion as to how to use the tagline. It's just that we're delaying the use of the tagline. So right now, currently, we'd be using the logo without the tagline. Eventually, we'd be using it with the tagline. We just want to wait for a while before we roll out the tagline along with the logo. So, but I wish I would have brought those three with, and in fact, I could run upstairs and get them if you wanted me to show you what those look like.
It would be helpful for me. I mean, I want to go along to get along. I just like to pin down the detail a little bit if I could.
Mr. Casimir will run up and get them if there's additional questions while he's getting it.
Yeah, go ahead, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Not really additional questions. I think you answered all mine and clarified what the intent was of what we were doing, and I appreciate that. I agree with Councilmember Navarre and Councilmember Naxted. I'm be supporting the new logo. Also want to say that with the tagline, proposed tagline, it worked really well in the promotional cup that you provided with us at the end. I know a lot of people that want to buy them. They're excited about that. They think it's a great looking mug. And their question was, where can I get it and when can I get it? And so I guess my answer is going to be sometime this summer, so you'll keep us informed about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for promotional items, it's going to probably be more marketable than what we have now. But I do have a question. When through your course of your research of whether there was legislation taken on logo, did you find out when it was actually started being used as our logo?
Mayor Gabriel, I didn't. I don't know, Jamie, if you found that in your research either.
Well, I know that the tagline there, that, village with the past, city with the future, was on the first sign that went up coming into Kenai back in the 60s. In fact, it was interesting. I just saw it was there's a book that was put out that compiled the sort of the histories of the communities of the Kenai Peninsula in like 2008, somewhere in there, and that was in there. You could see a old sign. I think it was like circa 1960s, maybe early 60s. So, which was shortly after we incorporated. But, I guess my point was, is if you said, well, this was, started being widely used in the 70s, well, so were bell bottoms, and we don't see those too much anymore, and maybe it's time to sort of move it. I like the old logo, don't get me wrong. I think it served the Kenai well for many decades, but as far as if you're going to do exactly what you're trying to do to market the city, it's hard to really put that into marketable form as well as the new logo. So I think I stalled just enough to Mr. Cass more time to.
Mayor, could we just take it at ease while we look at the samples?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute at ease. And just so you guys online know, the clerk is going to email you
A picture?
Yes, thank you. So check your emails. And
Did she text it?
Could she text it? She could probably take a picture and text it. Yeah, probably just take a picture and text it.
That works for me, either way.
Yeah, Mr. Ostrander is going to, I think Jamie just is going to email it, and Mr. Ostrander is going to take a picture and text it, so.
Thank you.
What's that? Yeah.
Are we on the official IDs?
Yeah.
Thank you. So is everybody online able to get a picture of what we're looking at?
Yes, thank you.
Modern
I
technology.
got one.
Thank you. Councilmember Glenn Denning.
Yes, thank you for taking time to indulge me. Again, excuse me, I'm looking at the three here, and what really impresses me, just looking at letterhead and the one with the check by it, I think would make an excellent letterhead. It fills the page nicely and has the information on it. Then as far as promotional items and whatnot, as long as we have this logo, the idea of the logo and the information you have could be adjusted to fit the size of the pin or the pen or T-shirt or whatever else we want to make, and certainly we would be flexible in that approach. And yeah, I think it's pretty neat. Our economy is changing. We have a platform out there. I worked on it when it was shiny and new, and I'm not shiny and new anymore, and I'm sure it's not either. And as far as the the centerpiece of the display there, that will always be there, and it's a feature of our town, and it will always be honestly represented, and then we'll still maintain the police uniforms or have the legacy view of it. So there's no reason why we can't have a pantheon of display items, of focal points. And I think what is shown here as a letterhead is pretty neat, and for cups and whatever else, that can be artists' prerogative. So I will approve this. Thank you.
Councilmember Next.
So probably shouldn't say anything since he's going to approve it. But yeah, I'm not the most artistic person myself, so it's like reverse engineering. It's reverse art, So while we took the break, I googled Soldotna's logo, and I think we're kind of familiar with that. In my world, it kind of happened overnight, maybe 5 years ago. It's kind of an S. It's kind of the river. It doesn't look like ours, but it could, But how did it lay out? And it's real similar to this. And it's worked well for them, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just kind of comparing the artwork, if you will, being different, but, there's similarities, and, I like it.
Any further discussion on adoption of the proposed logo?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes. Councilmember Councilmember Navarre?
Councilmember Navarre. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I saw the layout. I'm not going to beat this thing to death because I support the logo. But certainly, like on business cards, I would assume that you would put the Kenai underneath it like it's on our document in our packet, and then the address and the person's name off to the right. So they're not all gonna, Kenai's not gonna be, in our page, it's underneath. On this one, it's next to it. So there's lots of ways to do it. So I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. We're
I
looking
just
at a
wanted-
letterhead, the rest of it is
On a business
artistic.
card, I like the one underneath, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on the proposed logo? Adoption of the proposed logo? See no other, Councilmember
Request
Maxon?
unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing or hearing none, our new logo is adopted. Next up, under G7, we have discussion set dates for council employee evaluations. In light of things, I got to thinking about this. We usually do these around the middle of April. Ahead of budget. We do have our city clerk's contract is up for renewal. Is that correct, Ms. Hines? Which is something else, another item that we'll have to get through in conjunction. That'll probably tie into the evaluations when we do the evaluations. I know you should all have your evaluation forms. I think that was sent out by Stormy Brown. So if you guys could scan those and send them to me, I could at least do some of the compilation of the scores and comments. But I'm still struggling about how we may have to do this, telephonically again, to keep. I'm open to suggestions about how we want to get through this evaluation process while we're sort of under these suggested guidelines because of the COVID-19. And I'm open, like I said, I'm open up for discussion. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I think this format that we have here could be adopted for an executive session. Over at the borough last night, they had an evaluation of an employee, and all they did is they just took the big assembly room, dogged it off, said executive session and going on, and that was it. They had the room to themselves, and all was well. I think if we just take variations on a theme, what we have here, there's no reason why we can't. It works better when we interact.
Sure, I agree.
It really does. We can have a more accurate discussions, and I would prefer something like that.
Does this curtain work? I mean, I think the borough has something similar. Is that a sufficient type of divider for?
Yeah, I think we could probably just close the door and then have sprinkle the body throughout the room. As long as we can. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I tend to, I agree with Councilmember Glendenning. This is a big room, and the way we have it laid out today could work. I would be also interested if our employees have a preference. If they would like to, meet in person in the room like us, like this, or how they feel about it. So, if anyone wants to say anything, I'm kind of interested in what our three employees would like to see happen.
Any preference, Scott, Paul, or Jamie?
No preference.
I do have a preference. Yes, if I'm being asked, I would rather do it in person.
Yeah.
That interaction is better. If we can create the social distancing necessary, I'd rather do it that way.
Right. No, I prefer that too, honestly. Yeah. Okay, let's.
Okay,
Hearing
Bill?
that,
Well, let's set some dates then. Anybody want to throw something out there that?
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes, Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. Just, not that I have a date yet, but I think the clerk can get us to the dates by all of us calling in or texting her back and saying I'm available. Back on,
What, are you talking about like a doodle poll?
back,
Like
yes.
Yes.
But I wanted to go back to the comment. I too want to get us together, but we also have to keep in mind, and some people have in the past, for the most part, we've been there, and I think that should be accommodated, even if we have to use the library. But I think the chambers is big enough, and for us to spread out, and for our employee to feel comfortable. But I also want it clear that people can participate by teleconference. That doesn't change.
Sure.
It's just like some people might have to quarantine themselves for a number of reasons, and they shouldn't be left out. Thank you.
Correct. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree, which we can accommodate here easily. So and we've done it in the past. Times where people have called in on evaluations. So I guess the first question is do we want to do them all in one evening, or do you want to split it? Councilmember Naxton?
I'd go, we split them up. It's worked better in the past. The attorney and the clerk one night, and the city manager another. Matter of fact, we could probably do them all in one night, but I think that's pushing it. How about I throw out the evening of the 15th and then the 16th? I think we did the one last year after, like an executive session afterwards.
Yeah.
And so just to throw out a couple
Well,
dates.
because that's a council meeting night.
Yeah.
Is everybody good with the 15th and 16th of April? We do Mr. Ostrander on the 15th, and then Ms. Hines and Mr. Bloom on the 16th?
Question, would Mr. Ostrander be before the council meeting, like in the afternoon, or would it be after the council meeting, if it's the 15th?
We should have a fairly light agenda, don't we, that evening?
I would anticipate that it's going to be pretty light.
Okay. Thank you.
So
I'm good.
Okay, so we could do Mr. Ostrander on the 15th, and then what time for Ms. Hines and Mr. Bloom on the 16th? I'll start at 5. I'd rather start.
That works for me.
I'd rather start a little bit earlier, just.
I like earlier in the day, Mr. Robert, on all of these.
Okay, 5 o'clock then. Everybody in agreement? 5 o'clock.
How about 3 o'clock?
That might be a little early for me.
Yeah, I won't be available.
4?
Do we hear 5?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, if I could, honestly, if I could meet earlier, I would, Robert, but that would be pushing it for me. Okay, I think we're,
Just out of comment, if I could.
yes.
Not that the 15th and 16th, but can we do it sooner? I mean, I'll tell you, my calendar got real clear. I don't have anything on weekends. Highly unusual. I don't, April, not that there's not going to be people, how they're dealing with things, but I'm wondering why we can't get this done sooner.
Comments from the body? Vice Mayor Malloy.
You know, it would be, it's getting the evaluations done, and to Mayor Gabriel, for me, you know, I need more time. So that's why the 15th and 16th of April works, you know, given the other workload that I have. So.
Councilmember Glendenning.
I see here on the schedule that the 1st of April, the draft budget is to be distributed to council. At least we'll have more homework to do at that time. So I'm with Councilor Malloy that we stick with our mid-month proposal.
Okay. Yeah, I get your point, Mr. Navarre, but I think everybody's sort of still leaning with the 15th and 16th. Councilmember next, then.
Just one thing to follow up on something you said earlier. Those forms are fillable, so you can fill them, save them, and then just email them as an attachment.
Yeah.
So, you know, digitizing isn't, I mean, you could print
Right.
it out and digitize it, or you can just have it electronic, and it's real easy. Then you can type it up and you're not
Right.
writing it out.
Easier to read.
Absolutely.
I'll stick it in your
Councilmember
door.
Glendenning. What's that?
I'll bring it to your door.
Just stay 6 feet away.
I promise not to lick the stamp then.
Yeah, thank you. You're probably me. All right, moving on. I think we're all satisfied with the resolution on that. Next up, we're under G8, discussion Parks and Recreation Commission and City Council Student Representative policies brought forth by Vice Mayor Malloy. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. Yes, this is just a discussion item in the council packet. My intent would be to bring forward a resolution, you know, that would, so that council could debate, you know, for approval of the recommendation of the amendment to the policy for student representative for Parks and Recreation Commission. So I just wanted council to have the opportunity to see this and what they're proposing. You know, the 3 recommendations that they're making, which would be basically open the pool of applicants to you know, any students that are city residents, you know, through a school administration, which is different than, and then I put in the policy that we have, or the clerk put it in so that council could see it, that has to do with how we select the student representative to our own council. I don't propose to have at this time to have a resolution for that. First, you know, I want to see where the resolution goes with the proposal for the Parks and Rec Commission, but I do see, you know, parallels to the student representative for the city council, you know, and given that we don't have one currently from Kenai Central High School. So that's all that I have to offer on that tonight. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I'd,
Go ahead.
Councilmember Glendenning, and
Yeah,
then we'll go to Peter.
I'm in agreement with this approach. It's more flexible and recognizes that there's other empowered and empowerable and very, very eligible candidates other than just the brick and mortar school. And I agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Malloy. And was it your intent to use the Parks and Rec example as the model going forward, or will we just adopt it before they reacted or acted?
Vice Mayor Malloy.
So, you know, it depends on what council's view of this one is at the next meeting. So for the next meeting, there would be a resolution approving the amended policy because council has to, you know, decide whether they approve it or not. And then, you know, with that discussion, there may be a resolution at a later meeting that would make us similar changes for the council policy on its own student representative. So wouldn't be doing both at once.
That seems a logical progression. And then this would take us into the fall before it came to fruition, right? After the virus thing is cleared out and we have more room up here?
Yeah, I had the same question too, whether it applied to council. I think if we adopt it for one, that would automatically segue to the next. Yeah, I support the proposed changes, absolutely. I know Councilmember Peterkin, you sound like you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just actually found this. I didn't see it at first in the packet, but I was trying to understand what we're changing, but I'm kind of seeing it here. I'm in favor of it.
And you'll, if I may?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you'll have an opportunity to consider it further because, we have to bring back a resolution to approve it. So we're not approving anything tonight. You'll see it again at the next meeting, Robert, Mr. Peterkin.
Well, thank you, Bob. I want youth involved from the peninsula in our council and also in Parks and Rec. So I'm an advocate for that in a huge way, and I'm sure that that's what your intent is. So thank you.
Any other comments from online?
Mayor?
Oh, who's that?
Yes,
Yeah, Councilmember Navarre.
thanks. Yeah, I'm not fully comfortable with the change. And I will try to find out. I believe the school district brings all the schools together, and they elect their different representatives for the different responsibilities. And I believe even if you're in Connections or the others, that you're all part of that organization, because they appoint people from out the whole peninsula to be a student rep on the school board, and they appoint a representative to be on the school or the assembly. I'm not sure if they bring up all the cities at the same time or those schools do it individually, as we've had it before. But I think there might be a mechanism that way. I'm also a little concerned that whoever is the representative should represent the larger body. And certainly the only high school at this point that have juniors and seniors in the city of Kenai that I'm aware of is KCHS. So I want to look into, when the student body gets together, how they appoint people. And I like the fact that our high school is representative, has somebody representative at that, and they represent the students, and they're in a larger group to be able to have those discussions, to really get feedback from students. And so I don't think it fairly, I appreciate the fact that you have homeschoolers or whatever, but if they're taking the Galena homeschooling course, doesn't mean I want to exclude them, but I don't feel comfortable that we, even as a body, would say that representative represents, all the students in our community. That's why we've always used the high school, and I don't see that changing right now. So I have some concern by just putting it on paper, but essentially we're always going to appoint the person from KCHS normally. And it just adds to a conflict potentially. So those are my comments, but I'll wait for the resolution. But I just don't understand why the change. I don't see the community screaming or the students screaming out that they're being excluded. Because if you're in connections in the Kenai Peninsula Borough and you're from Kenai, you should be eligible, yes. But I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarre. Any other furtherance to the discussion here? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, at one time I ran a essay contest for patriotism, and it was out of the Elks Lodge, and it was open to all students, high school students who resided in the community, regardless of where they were schooled. And I had great response and a varied response, and it was bundlesome to adjudicate, how we select in all of this, and perhaps it was largely to my discretion in the committee I had, but I found that we had a more fulsome representation of the students in the town, their backgrounds, their approaches to life, and how they are experiencing our society. And at this time, I'll wait till I see the resolution from Councilor Malloy, but I'm inclined to broaden our aspect. We've been struggling to fill that seat now for some time, and perhaps this will not only give competition, but give more numbers to pick from. Thank you.
Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I look forward to your resolution, and that it does include any junior or senior in Kenai, wherever they are. That's what it says. It's not just KCHS, so that's good. Thank you.
Yes, and again, my intent would be to bring forward one that just deals with Parks and Recreation Commission at this time for the next meeting.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing here none, we'll move to discussion. Public.
Gabriel,
Yes.
this is Tim again. I would ask that the administration, the fact that somehow we've missed a representative at our body. I don't know what happened. I know there was a new principal put in at Kenai Central High School, and there might have been a confusion and an appointment not made. I don't know if we normally send the request to the high school or when they did it, but I don't like the fact of accusing people of not filling the seat when in fact I think there's a lack of communication someplace that happened, whether it's at our part or the high school's part. That's why I think there's a vacant seat.
Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Navarre, I just wanted to point out that I have emailed the principal of the school twice since I received Mr. Summers' resignation, and I've not heard a response from her as to whether she wanted to replace that person or let it sit vacant until the next year. I've emailed her like I said, I've emailed her twice and haven't heard a response. And I also heard it came through Charlie Stevens that there isn't a school. They used to have a student body council or something like that, and they're not calling it a student body council anymore. It's changed within the school, and so it's this last time it was put through that other one, but it's called a leadership group, a student leadership group at the high school, and so at least that amendment would need to be made.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move to item G7 or G9 rather, discussion public official financial disclosure statements brought forward by Vice Mayor Malloy. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this one may have a potential action, whether council wants to direct the clerk to develop an additional form, and the city clerk may have some comments for our consideration, and the city attorney may have some comments for our consideration. But the genesis of this is, that thinking about reducing paperwork burden for ourselves, and especially for, Planning and Zoning Commission, and then our 3 employees who have to do this also. And in this respect, for some people, most of the pertinent financial information may not change for year to year. For me, as an example, I think I had to change it twice, in the 14 years that or 15 years that I've had to, provide a financial declaration form. So I was thinking that perhaps a form could be developed where, we just incorporate by reference what we filed as far as those schedules that set out most of the information if nothing's changed, and that would just make it simpler and take less time. So that's the why I was bringing this forward, just because if council was interested in that, there potentially would be enough time for that to happen, for before April 15th, the due date. Thank you.
Councilmember Naxted.
I've only done it 6 times or so, and it stayed pretty much the same, and it is a little tedious, but it's only a little bit. I mean, it takes me 10 minutes, and it's a fillable form once again. I've got last year's, and I just transfer it over, and I kind of had thought something along those lines too. I thought, well, gee, if I don't, pardon me? If I don't fill out the form each time or read it and do that, I'll probably not pay as close of attention, and it probably is good that I read it if there's something changed. Or alternatively, if we wanted to do that, perhaps if I could just change the date at the bottom of the form and re-sign it, and I reprint it, and then we'd be good to go, because I wouldn't change anything. I just change the date, because I think it only lives on the bottom of the form. And maybe the title on the front page, I'm not sure. But as it is, I wouldn't call it burdensome. Maybe it's just another form the clerk has to. I don't want to say no. I just don't find it to be that big of a deal, personally.
Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, I would tend to want to approve this direction. Some people's financial involvements are a little more complex. I know as time goes by, mine's getting simpler. Probably this year I'll just have to change a ticker symbol or something, but still to accommodate the people that have to go through this. If you look at all the questions, they can be quite challenging, equating that of a tax return, and so we're all committed to accuracy. But if it's the same information as the previous year, I think maybe we should have this option. It doesn't impact me because I just have to change a ticker number or something like that. But people, again, to reiterate, people that have a more complex financial situation and perhaps would appreciate a more complex and consistent financial situation would appreciate just having a truncated approach to this. Thank you.
Any comments from online?
Yes, this is Tim.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'm for looking at this and seeing what changes we could do. I know in the past I had to fill out a state one for the school board, and because they don't have their separate financial disclosure. And in the city, I was able to just attach that, but sign the back page of the cities and the front page. But certainly it doesn't hurt to look at this and to accommodate. One thing could be that you just have to give the delete. When you get elected every 3 years, you have to file the any changes or deletions that you might have had from the year before, but that every new year that you get elected, do a clean update. You're not going off where the public would have to go back and look at deletions and added from years before. But I'm for looking at it and seeing what we can do to make it more user-friendly, and that all of us, including me, are following, the spirit and of the law. Mine had to be more detailed because of the number of holdings. But like you said, things change over time and people do things. But and at some point, if it's ever put online, like the states, where you can just push, because essentially at the state level, you can push amend, copy it and amend it, all the other stuff stays, and you can delete the things that aren't there anymore and add ones that are, and you don't have to retype everything that is on there. So to answer your question, I'm for looking at this. I don't know if we'll get it done before April 15th when this one is due. Sorry, Bob, I just don't see it happening. But maybe we can get it worked on and accomplished so by the next requirement, a year from now, we'll have a clearer system. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, it's hard to communicate because I'm hearing my feedback and other people might have their mics on. It's very tough to speak, I'll tell you.
Yeah, so everybody online, if you're not the one talking, if you would make sure your phones are muted, that would definitely help. Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yeah, I just wanted to make another comment before inviting, with the chair's permission, the city clerk might have some comments, and the city attorney, like code change or whatever. And yeah, if it doesn't happen by April 15th, it doesn't happen by April 15th. Every council member's situation is a little different. Mine is different because, I'm a professional, and so there's a review I have to do anyway. And one of the forms that I have to do myself is to disclose who my corporate business clients are that pay me more than $5,000 a year. And so that's not a city form. It's something that I have to add. I don't have to do individual clients, but I do have to do corporate clients. So I need to, go through my cash receipts for every month for the year and figure out, which ones have paid me more $5,000, so that more than $5,000, so I can put that on my list. And so everybody doesn't have to do that, but for me that adds on, some time. So that list changes every year. Yeah, so I have to do it anyway, but if I could just say everything else hasn't changed, that would save me some time. But, again, that's only personal. I do think there's a benefit for everybody, especially our planning and zoning commissioners who get, take home less than $100 a month, and everything. And so with that, if, with the permission, with the chair, maybe the clerk could speak to it and the city attorney.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jamie how she envisions this might work, Mrs. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm certainly happy to amend it however is beneficial for the body. The one thing that I know needs to happen is that if we are incorporating a past year's information, that it needs to be copied and incorporated at the time that we're filing it. It can't be a simple statement that says that the previous year's information is still valid. Sure. Because we destroy every 6 years. So in the 7th year, that one's destroyed, and now we don't really know what that one said. So it does need to be copied, which would be a little bit more effort on the part of the clerk's office, but I'm certainly supportive of doing that if that is if that's helpful for everyone else. And I've spoken briefly with the attorney about potentially, making extra lines at the bottom to initial that it's still valid in a particular year, even though it says throughout, and it does say throughout the document what year you're supposed to be looking at, and it's possible that that could be removed as well to make it so that they're just photocopied and attached. That piece is not in code that it has to be, the year has to be on every single section.
gotcha,
I think it
okay.
was just intended in the beginning to be helpful so that,
Sure,
to be clear. That's really all I have.
okay. Mr. Bloom, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope, whatever you guys decide to do, I'll make work. If you want to do something long-term, I'll probably bring a code amendment later, but if you want to get something done by April 15th, I think that's good to go.
Mr. Nexted?
I've already turned mine in a week ago. So,
Vice Mayor Malloy?
So, I know I'm over my allotted opportunities to
I,
speak, but just to, I think Councilmember Navarre had a good point, and I don't know if this would reduce the burden on the city clerk, but if you have to file the complete form every time you're elected, then you would only be able to say, I already did it twice, and then you'd have to do it again if you got reelected. Maybe that would address the issue of having to photocopy the previous year. Just something to
But
think about.
if we, I guess could you do a form that you only change the date on? If you were taking out the references to the other years? So you just basically take that, put on the new date, and then just print it.
I
Yeah.
think technology can make us do a lot of things.
Yeah, because
I
I
can
think,
wrap
I
my
think
brain
that would
around
be
it.
easier, because you're attesting to that current year, and that, but essentially, even if it's the same, nothing's changed, but you're retyping. Now, because I'm, like everybody up here, I think mine's changed a couple times over the last 10 years, but, but most of the time, they're the same. So if I could just go on there and pull up a printable or a workable document that I can just change the date and then print it or scan it to you after I sign it, that would be the easiest thing for me, but.
Yes, I think I have a lot of ideas. If we do go to the piece where you have to do it at election, currently, if you're already elected, you don't have to do it during election time, and that is in code, so that would require a code change.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
So I guess my question for my colleagues is, do they want a motion to direct the clerk to give us a form or to look at it the next meeting, or do we just want to ask her to do a form for this year and then we individually, we may or may not use it?
Yeah, I would be up for that. Then that would be up for approval at our April.
You want one for approval for the next meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
that might get us through this year, and then we can just work on something beyond that. That's what I would be for. Or was that too inconsistent with what you might want to do later, I guess? I mean, I guess I'd defer to you. What would be easier? I mean, if you presented a form that we could carry on further instead of a stopgap, that would be, I think, best case scenario.
Yeah, I think it'd be best to have an idea of whether or not you want to incorporate the mandatory changing it at election time so that we know if it's a code change or not, so that we can include that in what we bring forth at the next meeting.
Mr. Vice Mayor Malloy?
So for me, that would depend on whether you think that change would allow you not to have to copy the previous years. Because you're not gonna have to get rid of them.
I don't think that that's gonna change me having to copy them. I think I can figure something out to make it so that I don't have to copy it every year.
Okay, so do you have enough information to move forward for our next meeting, Ms. Hines?
Yes, so you want the form to come forth to approve the form? I don't,
Yes.
yes, okay.
Any other comments from online? Hearing none, we'll move to commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Yes, the meeting scheduled for this month was canceled the day before. We had a State of the City presentation by administration that was very well received, and perhaps actually took the part of a Council on Aging meeting. There was many suggestions and comments and discussion about doings at the senior center that I thought were inviting, and I noticed the city manager took notes. The next meeting would be on April, would be the 9th, but that is contingent upon where we are with this virus situation. I would suggest that perhaps it'll be some time before we meet again. Do I have that right, Ms. Hines?
Correct.
Thank you.
And the March 20th, the Meals on Wheels is canceled or postponed?
I'm sorry,
I think
yeah,
postponed.
it's been canceled, and then people from the center were so kind and did follow through that I got a phone call also confirming that understanding. So stay tuned, and as many other events are in this town. Thank you.
To follow up on that, since, you know, if everybody got the flyer from them, it also included any donations and whatnot, which is all part of it and the idea. So, and just a tagline on, you know, and what we personally did is, we did provide a donation. We probably would have late at that meeting, but we did it now, and just to kind of help that, because those meals continue on. So I would encourage anybody listening or that's here to do so.
Yes, yeah, I received the form and acted appropriately. So it's the need is ongoing, and without the major fundraiser, you know, we perhaps should look at the cash flow of that. But that's a subject for another meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Airport Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The Airport Commission met on the 12th, and they brought up the item that was on our on resolution on the approving the lease to the Schillings on airport land, and they also got briefed by the city manager or the airport manager on the virus and what some of the discussions at that point were that the administration were starting to work on, and how people would work from home and some of those issues. Their next meeting, I believe, is April 9th, if in fact they have one, like you said. So, thank you.
Harbor Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We met on March 9th, and our first new business was the approving the Title 11, which we did. It's been kind of a common theme. And then the next thing is we discussed the cranes and operating leases of the dock. The dock, nobody put in a bid to lease the dock, but my understanding is there's still people interested in possibly leasing it, and we're open to negotiate with them. And then we also brought up the possibility of reintroducing fueling, maybe a fuel contractor at the dock, and that's something that Scott's going to look into, Curtin, and we'll see where that goes. So I'm suspecting we're not going to meet for a little while with the virus thing going on, but I look forward to our next meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterkin. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Just point of order.
Yes.
With our adopted protocol, we would be able to meet like telephonically or something for the harbor, right? For the commission, we can have our commissions and committee meetings. It was just the senior group that likes to meet in person, and it's over at the senior center that I referenced the virus consideration.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think that's something we're gonna weigh against where we're at in a couple weeks. We had an increase from, 3 to 6, from 6 to 12 to today, so, this thing changes pretty dynamic, and we don't know where we're at, which hence the legislation we did. So to answer your question, yes, we could, or there's still the possibility that could be canceled. So,
Okay, yeah, thanks.
whatever we feel is going to be best for the health of the members is what's going to trump all other decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Parks and Recreation Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. At present, the next Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 2nd.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission?
Planning and Zoning met on March 11th. They approved, recommended unanimously the lease that we discussed this evening with Schillings. They also discussed the Title 11 that we also discussed this evening. And the next meeting on March 15th has been canceled, so the next probable meeting is April 8th.
Thank you. Beautification Committee?
Yes, thank you. Our next meeting is in April, and if the clerk would give me my specific date, I don't have the calendar in front of me, please.
April 14th.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Petty. Mini Grant Steering Committee, there is no report. On the report of the mayor, I did go to the budget presentation at the senior center. It was very, it was fun. I always like those because they are pretty loose and fun, and they're relaxed. So the folks that go to those really get a chance to interact with the administration, and plus they always got good cinnamon rolls and treats and everything else there. So, I like the interactive, surveys you guys did, along with the little quiz that to start out with, door prizes was really neat too. So much appreciated. Moving on to address probably what's all on our minds here with COVID-19 virus. We had a meeting where just to kind of start at the latest ramp up, where Governor Dunleavy was going to meet down here and do some town halls, and we were going to host them here with other local communities, and that got canceled, which was unfortunate because we had a lot of pertinent questions regarding the city of Kenai we were going to ask him, and then it turned into a cancellation of, it was supposed to be a postponement of the meeting in the morning, then it turned into a cancellation, and of course the joint chamber cancellation of the town hall at Kenai High School. So, and I'm not faulting the governor, it's sort of, but just the whole kind of idea of where it started to really ramp up, because, prior to that, there were some concerns, but not to the extent where we're seeing now with, dine-in establishments shutting down. Not just that's locally in a lot of local areas, but nationally, car production being halted, lockdowns, shelter in place in a lot of cities. So this is something I've never experienced in my almost 60 years, and probably for most people, unless someone was still alive in 1918, which was when the Spanish flu epidemic struck, was the last major epidemic. And So the impacts to the local community is pretty severe. We had, there was concerns about, the turnaround out at, Marathon, Refinery, the Kenai Refinery with the influx of people that were expected to come into the area for that. I did reach out, to the plant manager over the weekend to just discuss with him, you know, some of the concerns that, you know, that I was getting from, on my email and phone calls from folks that were, you know, saying on one hand, hey, we're shutting down schools, we're taking all these, steps to mitigate, spreading and, you know, it seemed kind of counterintuitive to what was happening, and not fault that I don't doubt that Marathon would do the best they could to mitigate or put controls in to help mitigate, but the way this is, it's so dynamic. We're seeing where a lot of controls are being put in place, you know, there's still breaches of the virus. So they did come out with, you know, I want to thank Marathon Petroleum they did come out and make a decision to postpone their turnaround till August time frame. But with that, it shows that they're, you know, and these turnarounds are planned 2 years in advance, and they're, you know, there's a lot of thought, a lot of money being planned, you know, set aside for them. They're meeting federal requirements, but the fact of the matter is that's something that there wasn't a state mandate like with the dine-in house decision made by the state. That was something they made on their own, kind of seeing what went for. So this is you know, a lot of people are understanding the severity of this and taking actions and precautions to limit the spread. And I guess my whole point here is that yes, it's a bummer. I mean, we are seeing things that no one can really even relate to. It seems surreal when you wake up in the morning that there might be another thing that's going to come down the pike, like let's say a domestic travel ban, which is, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to spool everybody up and get them, but those are things that maybe this is going to work. But if that does happen, understand that everybody has to do what they can, practice best management practices, which are put out by the CDC and the state, and try to do that to mitigate the spread of this and propagation of it further. Because what we don't want to see is a spike, and the term flatten the curve has gone around, and that's a good point to understand. Is what we're trying to do is flatten that out, so we're not going to inundate our healthcare facilities, and be in a situation where, you know, we don't have the resources to deal with that. So that's one way we're going to have to do it, and understand. And the last thing I'll just end on this for the folks of the city of Kenai. We have a capable group of employees and administration that work for us that I have no doubt. I look around this room and I look at, if I had to pick people to go through something like this with, I can't think of better people than we have at this city. So, you know, rest assured that we are going to do the best we can and put in those practices and implement those practices to be, you know, to keep our citizens as safe as possible. So with that, I'll just say that, you know, it's a bummer that we're going through it, but, you know, I think we're surrounded by very capable people to accomplish what we need to. And with that, I'll turn over to administration report, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'll just touch on a couple things quick and then give the council an update on where we're at with the COVID-19 response. Two things I just want to mention is the State of the City address. Second year, Mayor Gabriel and I have done that, and I enjoyed it both years. Really appreciate the opportunity to do that with him. And then the second is the Invest in Kenai at the Senior Center. Staff helped put together a great presentation, I think well received. So really enjoyed both of those things. Hope to continue to do those in the future if we're able. So on COVID-19, I just wanted to make sure that council is aware of all the steps that we've taken and kind of the progression that we've gone through here at the city. You know, this really started for us as administration. We really started looking at this more closely Actually, last Thursday, I brought all the department heads together at a special meeting, and we discussed what action should potentially be taken at the city level. And at that point, we didn't take any actions. But then on Friday, we actually had our first meeting of our incident management team, which is a group, an executive team here at the city. Had our first meeting on Friday, and still we started formulating some plans on things that we'd want to do. And then on Saturday, actually, the first press release was provided, which stated that the library and the senior center were going to be closed effective Monday. Those continue to be closed. Senior center is delivering a significant number more of home meals than they typically would, because people are at home and unable to get out. And so it's a service that's really helping the members of our community that are at home and are unable to get out. So really good that we're able to continue for those employees to continue to work and continue to provide that service and actually expand that service beyond what we typically do. So on Sunday, there was no action taken, but on Monday, we had an all-employee meeting at 10 o'clock Monday morning where we set up a telephone bridge where all of the employees could call in, and I gave them all an update on what was happening, what had happened over the weekend, what they could expect going forward. I actually read them a letter from Governor Dunleavy that he had published in the newspaper on Sunday that I thought really encapsulated well what we as Alaskans need to do as we go through this. So we went through that, and then we also issued a memo to all of them. And in that, we laid out, how to maintain a healthy workplace. We also talked about what the symptoms of COVID-19 were or are. We also instituted the temporary leave, which council is familiar with, which was basically 2 weeks of paid leave for all employees in the city. That is temporary leave. It's not cashable, and will expire April 19th, although based on how things are proceeding now, I think it's possible that we'll see that temporary leave gets extended. On Tuesday, we issued another press release which closed all city facilities to public access. So that went into place as of 8 o'clock this morning. So today, for the first time, all of the City of Kenai's buildings were closed to public access. We've had a lot of questions from employees on how to do that, but we're working through those as they come up. And then today, I actually provided a memo to employees that increases the travel restrictions. So the travel restrictions that we'd had in place was that all city-sponsored travel was canceled. Now, and then the second step of that was if we had employees that were coming in that were either from an area where there was community spread of the virus, or if they came from an international location that had community spread, they were going to be isolated for 14 days, not allowed to come into work for 14 days. We've expanded that now so that any employee that is traveling into the state from out of state will have to self-isolate for 14 days, not be allowed to come into work for 14 days. That also includes if there's a member of their family that resides with them, that they will also, that employee would still have to self-isolate for 14 days. So, for example, we've got one employee who has a family member that's coming in from out-of-state travel on Monday. That employee will be isolating for 14 days. So that's new today as far as the post-travel additional travel restrictions. We are having a standing meeting of the incident management team every morning here, actually in these chambers. We have consistent communication with all the other cities. It's certainly the cities on the peninsula, but also cities across the state. Particularly, I've been in constant communication with Stephanie Queen, City Manager Soldotna, trying to make sure that we coordinate some of our efforts and some of the actions that we're taking with Soldotna. I will say that the employees are responding extremely well, and they recognize the importance of their actions for the well-being of the entire community and particularly of our ability to continue to provide essential services to the city of Kenai as we move through this. And those essential services we've identified as a city, and those are really our focus, to make sure that as we move through this, that we can continue to provide those essential services throughout. So with that, that's my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city manager?
I have a
Councilman,
few.
go ahead.
It's good to know that we'll have a place to put all that toilet paper that people are hoarding, keep our sewer plant going. Start off on a light note. But are we going to look at our disaster protocols? Councilor Malloy mentioned that it was 2007, and I recall something about that. Just as we go along in connection with our experiences in this situation, will we be revising and updating those? Had you suggested that?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendening. Yes, we will be updating the EOP after this event.
Good. And then, did I see somewhere in the literature that maybe our financial foundation is going to be reviewed as how we disperse funds from our various enterprise funds? Is that a consideration, or because we take a prescribed average, we are covered and we don't have to adjust our budget? Maybe I misread what was there, but I think reading through the lines, I think you're paying attention to it through your finance department, and I think it's a good approach, just to be mindful of our cash flow and where we may wind up with our investments here in the not so distant future.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, so through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening, that what Mr. Eubank has been working on is a determination whether or not we should change the methodology with which we're making the annual distribution from our permanent funds. He and I met with the consultants last week and talked about those options, and they're actually creating some additional scenarios to determine whether or not we should change that methodology. None of this discussion has anything to do with the fact that the stock market has gone down so extensively over the last 3 weeks, but certainly that will potentially impact distributions as we look into the next fiscal year.
And then another question. You talked about the leave that's being provided to our employees as prescribed. And then perhaps there's something additive that might be coming from the federal government's response that would allow for a more lengthy leave, or are you anticipating a federal program to cover this initiative?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening, I know there is legislation that's going through Congress currently that will provide for, at least my understanding is 2 weeks of sick leave for employees for organizations that have fewer than 500 employees. I haven't familiarized myself with that legislation to the point where I can tell you whether that would apply to governmental organizations or not. But I know that there is legislation, and at least as far as I know, it has not been passed and signed by the president yet, and I haven't familiarized myself with the details to know if it will apply to the city.
And then just one last thing. In our census cooperation, the library was to be a focal point for people to come in and make their applications. What I learned and the little bit I know about it is that perhaps fully 20% of the residents in our area really don't carry a phone or have access to a computer. Are we thinking about our approach as far as providing the support that we anticipated would come out of the library, but may not be available from that structure? Is there a way forward with that, or it's a question, a difficult one, but perhaps you could think about it.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening, they did approach us after we closed the library to utilize the library facility, and Katja, the library director, reached out to ask if we would allow that, and I said no. So we didn't allow that just simply because it didn't meet the objectives that we had of shutting down the library, which was protection from the COVID-19 virus. I do understand that the census ceased operations today, and they're going to be, and I don't know when they will start up again, but they have ceased operations as of today, and I think that's for next month or so. I'm not sure the details.
So they may reset the application protocols And could be when they fire up again, our library will be up and running, and that's good because as you know, the census is very important to us. So thanks for staying on top of that.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just at a recent meeting we had, you indicated that there might be some action, on the paperwork for the Bluff Erosion Project, moving from one federal office to another federal office, and I wondered if you could let us know what the newest status is of that.
Mr. Oshner.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and thank you for the question, Vice Mayor Malloy. I gave city manager's report, and I didn't give a bluff erosion update. That's odd. It did actually go from OMB to the Corps on the, I believe it was on the 11th. It went from OMB to the Corps, which was the next step necessary. And I was in communication with Murkowski's office immediately after that, and Garrett Boyle of Murkowski's office said he was going to contact his contacts with the Corps and make sure that they pushed that through. Immediately thereafter, everything switched to the coronavirus, and frankly, I have not reached out to Murkowski's office since then. I've been hesitant to, just simply because I'm sure that they're consumed with the same thing. But the good news is it did move from one agency to the other, but I don't have any information as to what's happened since it's resided with the Corps.
Thank you.
Councilmember Naxton.
I just wanted, more on the coronavirus, I just wanted to thank the city manager for his leadership in our city and the actions that you've pointed out that you've taken in the last few days. Didn't just happen in the last few days, I'm sure, because you would have had to think about this last week and consider it. So I know that there had to be a lot of forethought in a time when things are changing every day. When you make a decision like you've made, it may seem, I would think, one word might be overreacting perhaps, or getting ahead, but I think that is exactly what is necessary. In 2 days you look back and that was exactly the thing to do, and I prefer that you, if it's overreacting or kind of being ahead of the game, that's what you got to be. That kind of leadership is great. It's something that we need to do in this uncertain time. Don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day for that matter, but so far I think you've done very well on that. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. And if I could just comment
Yes.
briefly, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted, and I appreciate that. I've leaned really heavily on the members of the incident management team. It's a great group that is meeting and constantly working on this. And I should mention it's Jamie Hines, Scott Bloom, Christine Cunningham, Stormy Brown, Terry Eubank, and Dave Ross is that group. And without that collaborative effort of that group, the decisions would be almost impossible to make. But they've been hugely helpful. Really proud to be working with that group because they're great people.
I appreciate that clarification. You're the point guy, so that's who we hear, and I didn't know who. I knew you had some help, but I didn't know who. So very good. Thank you, everybody.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing, hearing none, we'll move to the city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I do just really want to briefly let you know that we are, and I do anticipate having to make decisions that may be outside of code. For example, the leave provision that we instituted, we will need to come back to council for ratification at some point. And I think Paul's done a great job communicating with you to make sure, that we're not stepping outside your comfort zone. But as we move forward through this, and as Paul said, and as you recognize, things are changing so fast that our reaction speed may require us to do things that are out of the ordinary, and we will certainly come back to council when necessary and try our best to stay within, what our code provides. But there are things that we will need to clean up later, but I think it's more important for the city to be able to respond in a timely fashion at this point. That's all I have.
Any questions of the city attorney? And I would have to agree with what you said, that I think at some level we have to show some leadership, and that example that you gave of temporary emergency leave was an example of that, where, you know, we weren't forcing people to come to work because they may not have had enough leave and expose other employees. That would have been, at the end of the day, if you're looking at it from a strictly financial point, would have been more expensive than just paying leave. So, I don't sort of say that's the way we should look at it, as a fiscal net gain, but you know, certainly it was very appropriate and showed the leadership I think needed. So, any questions of the city attorney from online? Hearing none, we'll go to the city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I have a retirement card here for you to sign for Jeff Tucker. Even though his retirement party has been canceled, we still have the stuff to give him, so we'll go ahead and do that. On March the 6th, the clerks of the Kenai Peninsula met here in Kenai to continue discussing moving forward for the by-mail election process, and as I had mentioned previously, Resource Data and Dennis Wheeler was doing a feasibility study on it, and he is going to be presenting, assuming he can and will, to the assembly on May 5th, his findings of his feasibility study. So I'll keep you notified as everything continues to form or gel or not, as that works out. And other than that, everything has been a little bit of a blur since last Friday, but if I didn't answer a question you might have, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions of the city clerk? Seeing or hearing none, we'll move to additional public comments. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to council comments. And let's start online. Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I too just want to thank our administration and all our employees, as well as the citizens of the city of Kenai, for reacting the way they have so far, and so that we can all get through this. I would also encourage people to keep in mind, to, especially with kids, and that you keep a good positive response and don't elevate the fear issue, because it can have an impact on them. Those of us that are adults can put it in perspective and do what we have to do, and at the same time keep it as positive as we possibly can. I guess that'll end my comments for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I echo what Tim says. I think that we need to, keep things in perspective and just, be okay with stepping back a little bit and spending time at home, and just not elevate the fear, and we'll get through this as we have everything else. And appreciate what the city's done. I know the country's in disarray. I mean, we're actually pretty lucky because we have the lowest infection rate, or whatever you call it, because of our measures. And I think that we need to continue what we're doing. I think our council, our city, our state, everything's doing a good job, and it's working, and we have low rates, and we need to continue. And anyway, I think we had a good meeting, and the phone thing worked fine for me. So thank you, everybody, and good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Petty. I'd just like to remind the folks online that we do have an executive session here, so make sure you stay on. Oh, we're going to call them back. Okay, very good.
Yes,
Sorry, Councilmember Petty.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just ask everyone to be safe and be calm and be thankful for all the plans that have been put in place, and the city and our nation and all of the friends will be in my thoughts and prayers. Thank you for a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Counselor, comments?
Yes.
Yeah, we're in crazy times, but as someone who is reaching the age of self-awareness at the end of World War II and the dawn of the nuclear age, somewhere in my memory, this has a counter theme that nothing's the same, nothing lines up directly. But I've seen in my lifetime anyway, in various parts of the country, where there's been a challenge like that, the best in people come out, and we will preserve and come to the best conclusion on our situation. Just a heads up, the borough had been working on the private streets and gated subdivisions. That is still before the borough assembly. What's coming up is it's on the floor, but it had been postponed for further discussion. The prospect that the replacement amendment to substitute ordinance 2924 adopting KBB 20.80 subdivision private streets and gated subdivisions is going to be brought forward. What the assembly requested is that there be a clean rendition of what the intent of legislation now is. Most important to us is that on the floor to be enacted is an application that says this chapter applies, referring to the gated community and streets. This chapter applies to all subdivisions within the Kenai Peninsula borough boundaries except for those within an incorporated city within the borough. There was some discussion that I heard on the radio that they may want some input from the city regarding this, and they put a timeline, I think, towards the end of April. But our representative on the assembly, Hal Smalley, would really be able to give us insightful comment on this, and if some direction is truly being asked from us to provide input on this change of approach. And with that, I end my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I agree with you and Councilmember Naxted and our colleagues online about, commending the city manager and his team for the work that they've done dealing with the developing COVID-19 crisis. And it's a real difficult thing to do to develop administrative policy and then to support us in developing legislative policy in such a fast-moving scenario where, scientists are information, modeling projections, things that they're doing change all the time with new information. So it's really difficult to make policy and make it work when, and so I think that, again, like they did a really good job, and I agree with you that the public should be confident that we have a good team, for addressing it as it develops in Kenai, and I also, again, like to, feel, express gratitude to community members, especially, people that have children, that are home now, and businesses that have to make an adjustment on such short notice to their operations and everything, and the good attitudes that people have in adjusting to that, because we don't have a healthy economic base if we don't have public health, and kind of the needs of public health are sort of driving the situation as it develops, and again, I think the city of Kenai is doing a really good job of adjusting to this big moving, issue that we have, and also our public is in a very positive way, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxton.
Get to speak last. I agree with what I've heard here, and, we're going to get through this, and this country, the city has been through difficult times and in the past, and we've gotten through it, and I don't see this to be, it's going to be different, but the end result, we'll get through it. It's a storm, and I think at this point, the public has a pretty good idea what to do. We're spread out. It doesn't look like a surprise. Hand sanitizer, other things, you go into a business and whatnot, all of those things, and keeping mindful and doing what we're supposed to do is going to get us through it. And I want to always look beyond, once we get through the storm, then what? When that stops, there'll be some optimism, and what we need to do at that point, or at least I feel that I want to do within our city is, that's a time to try to invest back into the city in, going to some of these restaurants, maybe even more than I am now, or contributing where I can, because I do know a few restaurant owners, and they were taken quite by surprise. I'm not saying that what the governor did was wrong at all, but they have supplies, they have fruits, vegetables, and all of that, and what are they going to do with it, or whatever? I guess maybe they're going to make soup. I don't know, and freeze it. But nonetheless, it's a problem. They have these employees that were going to come to work, and that's it. One day, and then what's going to happen? And what may happen with the federal government is they may send us all $1,000. Is the last thing I heard. Pardon? Yes, and something like that. And it's like, well, we get a stipend here for the city, and my philosophy here is I try to spend that money, frankly, in town, but something like that would be the same thing. It's something that I feel fortunate enough that I would be able to do, and I'd hope that others here, or anybody that might be listening, might think the same thing. But, we need to get ourselves kind of back into gear and kicked into gear, and, reinvesting into our city as we move forward, and that'll be like the next hump, really after this hump, and I think that will kind of ease that as we move forward. And I know I really see, the future to be bright. We just need to get through the storm.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would probably add that, not panic and rely on good information. I mean, one of the things I've noticed with social media, it tends to spawn a lot of disinformation that may get people spooled up. But whatever we do, if everybody stays calm and just relies on good information, we work the problem, and you're right, we'll get through it and move on from there. But get through it with at least a level of grace, hopefully. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'd move to convene the City Council of the City of Kenai into executive session for discussion of the facility management agreement for the Kenai Visitor and Cultural Center pursuant to AS 44-32310 C13, a matter of which the immediate knowledge may have an adverse effect upon the finances of the city, and a matter by which law, municipal charter, or ordinance are required to be confidential, and request the attendance as needed of the city manager and the city attorney.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing, hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes.
Motion passes. Council members on the phone, we're going to disconnect from this line because the public has access to the phone number, and I will call you back from our phones in here.
Thank you.
That was substantial.
I sneezed into my elbow and I used,
I felt the I mean, it was like.
I'm waiting to.
Good work, by the way.
Been busy, but you know what? We have a really good, group of municipal governments that share. So it's been good to talk to other municipalities and see what they're doing.
Plagiarize at every turn.
So you're both part of that, but, you know, because I'll ask you a question and you're gonna call somebody. And you
Right.
have somebody to call and then you have an answer.
Yeah. It is busy. I mean, it's interesting. Dealing with a crisis like this, I think, with the advent of
Hi, Lenny, it's Jane.
access to
I didn't think that,
Bullshit.
bullshit.
Yeah, I've personally limited my exposure to,
did you want me to call you for
I
a
get
new
the
number?
evening news, I'll get a little SRM news morning, and a bit of Facebook, but not much. It's just entertainment, but just for my own mental health, I just, because it's just, it's all one thing. It's, you know, it's something that I'm not afraid of. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not.
Glenny's, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm gonna put you on mute for a moment.
Okay, doke.
Meaning like